Welcome to Matt's Corner of Gem Cutting. I'm Matt. I am on to the third video of these massive quartz pieces that I've been cutting. This piece here is going to become a pear cut and is the fourth of 5 pieces that I'm cutting for Paul. The starting weight for this piece is 767 grams. Giving its cut and starting size, I suspect this one's not going to be as big as the other two I have videos on, but it's still going to be a fairly chunky piece. Internally, this piece is fairly clean and flawless. Some little fractures are like right on the edges and will cut out. This brown kind of surface stain will all be removed. And we'll end up with a nice, clear, clean piece again once I get this faceted. It's got a bit of an interesting starting shape. We're going to get to preforming it and figure out the orientation and start planning the cut. Okay. Move that back out of the way. I'm using a 80 grit lap for the rough end and it gets quite noisy. Use plenty of water. We got this big divot I'm going to remove. I'm just going to start giving it a general shape as well. Might take a while. This thing is as big as my lap. Oh yeah, I just did a little bit. I'm going to be all weak on this one. Might not be as big as those others, but it's still going to take a while. I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the mast. Just not getting a whole bunch of this overspray from the rough bits of the stone. It doesn't need to be on right now, so taking it off, keep it a little bit cleaner. Alright, I just had to go and refill my water. Go through quite a bit cutting these stones. I've been working on cleaning up the surface some. Still got some of these divots I need to work out and clean it up a little bit more. Even though this is an 8-inch lap, there's only a little over 3 inches of workable area, which isn't a whole lot of room when grinding on these stones, especially some of these larger faces. Look how cute that guy is. A couple of those little divots. Almost all of the fractures are out. Just got one going about 5 millimeters in, still to work out. Get that out and figure out the orientation. Alright, now that I have a bit of a primary preform done, removing all the fractures and surface stuff, I'm going to examine this stone from every angle to try and determine what will be best for orienting the stone for faceting. Here you can see there's a bit more of a curve on this side. For the table area I want to be more flat, but the pavilion will be better with the curve and it's more flat on this side. So I'm already thinking somewhere around here for the orientation. Now if I turn the stone and look at it from the face, it might look like I have a bit of a wide area to work with here, but if I turn the stone up a little bit you'll see that this is coming down at a bit of an angle. This portion of the stone out here is actually well below where the girdle line could be. And so looking at that, I might be able to rotate it a little bit, just depending on how exactly I want the orientation. Maybe very slightly tilted this way. I'll be able to work with about here. Bring the pear up about this shape. So I'm gonna go grind the flat a little better for that. Maybe grind off just a little bit more of the stone, the shape a little better, and then get a dopped. Now I have a good flat here that I can dop the stone to. I just need to do some markup, see how I'm going to dop this. So I drew this line about the same depth all the way around the stone. So going off that estimated girdle line, I drew a rough outline for what the pear shape could be. And I marked a central point for using for dopping. So using some super glue, I'll go ahead and attach the dop stick. Go ahead and get that aligned with my marks. Right in there is fairly close. Now this baking soda will help set the glue a little bit, and I'll add a couple layers of glue. Alright, so while this sets up, I'll see if I can get a design figured out for the stone. Okay, I'm ready to get going on this. I finally got the diagram made. I spent an entire day making this diagram. I wanted something with a lot of facets. It took me quite a while to get something to work. I kept reworking it until I finally ended up with this. I'm shooting for about 60 millimeters wide and 90 millimeters long. I'm going to start by roughing in the G1 and P1 facets and go from there. I'm still using the 80 grit that I used up for the preform. Well, let's get going on this. An hour and a half in the grinding. I haven't even made it through the girdle yet. The 80 grit's grinding in way slower than I'd like, so I stopped and I ordered some more 60 grit laps so I could use them to continue and have it go a little bit faster. Yeah, this has a lot more grit still going on it, so it'll work a lot better. I also had to get some new calipers. My kids got a hold of the last set and they were no longer working right, so currently 64.85. I'm thinking this will have to be about 60, maybe a little less, we'll see. Currently the width of this stone is right about 61 millimeters, just above where I want the width to be. But as I was cutting in the second set of girdle facets, I realized that this stone's general outline is not as curved as I designed coming up towards this point, slightly skinnier than I designed. So I had to go back in and redesign this upper outline on the stone to bring it in and have it just slightly more pointed. So hopefully that'll fit the stone a little better. I also made the table of the stone a little smaller since I had to go in and rework the crown facets anyway. So it won't be as hard to do when I get to that. So here's the stone after running it through the 60 grit. I only went through 17 of the Pavilion facet tiers, which is about half is all, but the remaining facets going up from here don't have a lot of angle change, so I'll just cut them in with a slightly finer grit, as the 60 grit is very rough on the surface of this gemstone. There's a lot of nicks and stuff. doesn't want to go down. So I'm just going to force it down with the screw. Maybe. Maybe not. No, that's not going. Apparently the arbor hole on this is very slightly smaller than it's supposed to be. I have another new one, so I don't really want to deal with that right now. So hopefully this one will fit. Oh yeah, that one fits right on there. Alright, so I'll use this 180 grit lap next. And I'll probably run through all the facets at this grit level. I've washed my machine a few times running through the 60 grit, but now that I'm switching grit sizes, very good idea to hurry and give it another wipe. Okay, that's better.
At this stage, I go back over the facets that I have already done, grinding in the facets enough to remove the wear from the rougher 60 grit lap. I try to keep the facet meets close to where they go, but I'm not too particular about being really precise yet, as the facets will be ground deeper several more times as I move through the grinding laps. Although I still consider this a rough-in or preform grit, I finished grinding in all of the Pavilion facets as the stone is huge and the finer grits will remove material more slowly. The next lap that I use is a 600 grit lap. This I use as my main cutting grit. Here I work the stone more precisely, paying close attention to the meet points. I mention grit sizes a lot in my videos as I move through the cutting sequence. The grit number refers to the size of diamonds being used as an abrasive. To keep it simple, lower grit numbers have larger diamonds. These make coarser abrasive tools that are quicker at removing material, but are rough on the material's surface. The size of the diamonds gets smaller as the grit number increases. Higher grit tools will remove material more slowly but produce a finer finish. After the 600, I move up to a 1500 grit lap. Here you can see the finish at this level next to the 600. It isn't all that polished looking yet, but it is looking a lot finer. You can also see that the facets have moved some from using this lap to remove the wear of the 600. The rest of the facets get worked back to their proper meet points as I go over each of them on the 1500 grit lap. Next up is pre-polishing at the 3000 grit level. I decided to use a tin lap for this. I lubricate this lap with oil and apply a thin layer of diamond compound to the surface of the lap. The thin topper laps that I've used up to this point have the diamonds already adhered to the metal's surface. Just like before, I go back over the whole stone. This is the fourth time going over all 109 facets between the girdle and pavilion facets, and the fifth time for the tiers done with the 60 grit. Each of the flat faces on a faceted stone is called a facet. Putting a whole lot of facets onto a gemstone makes my job quite fascinating. I go back over the facets one more time to finally give them a nice polish. A light mist from a spray bottle as needed will keep the lap lubricated, but not wash off the cerium oxide, and I run the lap at a lower speed. I use a dark side lap with cerium oxide to polish quartz. Polishing takes a little longer to run through, but it is nice to finally see the facets shining up to their finished state and knowing this is the final time going over the pavilion facets.
Well, that felt like ages, but I'm finally done with the first half. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and just get it transferred. I'm just using a notched V cone for this.
I build up a good amount of super glue around the dop to increase the surface area of the bond to the stone. My hope by doing this is to spread out the tension from the smaller area that the dop covers compared to the size of the stone to reduce the likelihood of the pavilion chipping or becoming damaged during the faceting of the crown.
I'll just let that sit until I'm ready to work on it again.
Here are all of the laps that I used for faceting the pavilion, arranged coarser to finer from left to right. This lets you visually see some of the different grit sizes next to each other. Starting on the left, there are the 60, 80, 180, 600, and 1500 diamond grit topper laps. Topper laps are thin laps that need a master lap as backing. And then there is the tin lap that I used with the 3000 diamond compound and the dark side lap with the cerium oxide. I use my alcohol lamp to heat and help remove the flat dop attached to the crown side of the stone. Wrapping the stone in a wet paper towel will help keep the stone cooler and prevent the dop attached to the pavilion from heating up as well, potentially weakening its bond.
Alright, so I'm finally ready to get going on the crown side of this stone. It's probably been a little over 2 months since I finished faceting the pavilion side. The pavilion, it took a little longer than I was planning for it. I had several commissions I needed to get done real quick, plus I spent a good amount of time during that 2 months on a remodel project I'm doing, but I'm finally ready to get going.
Setting a girdle of the stone flat on a master lap gets the rotation closely oriented before locking the dop into place. I start back with the 60 grit lap to quickly remove material and rough the crown into shape. I rough in all 60 of the crown facets. The angle of the last few tiers of facets were just low enough that it topped out the height adjustment on my mast, so I had to attach the mast extender to be able to grind them in. 60 grit is definitely quite rough on the stone surface. It got the job done, but there are a lot of little chips where the rough facets meet the girdle. Definitely got to be careful with this rough of a lap to not cut too close to the desired girdle thickness, as it risks chipping off a piece of the girdle, and the other laps will remove material thinning the girdle thickness as well. I'm trying to get through the crown more quickly than the pavilion, so I switch up the cutting sequence a little. After the 60 grit, I jump up to a 300 grit lap. I cut down far enough to remove the majority of those chips that formed along the girdle, but I go just far enough to do that. I don't mind if the girdle ends up being a little thick, as it is more proportionate to the size of the stone, and it is very unlikely that this gem will ever be set in any form of jewelry. It is a showpiece, and Paul plans for it to be put on display somewhere with the other jumbo-sized quartz pieces that I have cut for him. I go over each facet at each new diamond grit size, just as I did on the pavilion. The 300 is followed by the 600 grit lap. After the 600, I skip to a 3000 grit topper lap. It left the stone surface overall more shiny looking than the 3000 on the tin, but the topper lap had more of a problem with leaving some larger scratches. From there, I then went on to polish. I purchased a new dark side lap between faceting the pavilion and the crown. The old one is well worn and doesn't run perfectly flat. It was mostly manageable through making some adjustments to the angle or rotation if a facet isn't polishing evenly, but I was worried about how hard it would be to polish the table facet when I got to it. So I just got a new one. Polishing the crown on the new lap did seem to go a little easier than it did on the old lap. With the crown polish done, I can remove the piece from the mast and attach it to the angle adapter for faceting the table.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that's going to work that direction. I'm going to switch it. I'm going to rotate it in here. There we go, that fits a lot better.
Since the table facet is so big, I used a couple more steps similar to the Pavilion sequence to facet it. I started with the 60 grit to bring in the table a good ways, but left plenty of room before it meets to not end up with damage on the edge of the facets that meet the table. I brought it in more with the 180 grit lap, followed by the 300 grit. I then moved on to 600, and then to 1500. I had to slow down the speed some on the 1500 lap. I had to do this to keep the stone from hydroplaning and not grinding. I didn't like the scratching of the 3000 topper lap, so I went back to the 3000 on the tin lap to pre-polish, which turned out pretty good using that lap. The huge facet was kind of grabby on the polish lap, but eventually I managed to get it to polish up nicely. The piece looks like it will be pretty neat. I can already see a lot of color flashes showing up from the dispersion of light in the quartz.
I'm very excited to have this stone finished. I spent a lot of time working on it. This Pear definitely has the most length of the quartz pieces that I've done, of these massive ones. It might be a competitor up there for the carat weight. We'll have to wait and see when it's off. Only thing left now I gotta do is soak off this glue and the acetone, and I'm gonna see and weigh this finished piece. Okay, well, she's finally finished. Let's go ahead and get the weight. Alright, right close to 250 grams. That's right close to then 1,250 carats. So that'll make this piece the largest stone that I've now cut, slightly bigger than the other quartz pieces I've done as far as weight goes.
Time for a quick comparison. Here is the finished piece next to a large pear from the store. The pear has a little size over the stone. This piece is very bright. It does very well in low light settings. It finished at 88.3 by 58.15 millimeters. Not quite the 90 by 60 millimeters I was shooting for, but still up there. Here it is outside. It is completely overcast. I only handle the stone above the grass. I would be pretty devastated if I dropped it on the cement or something and chipped it. I think I would cry inside. I'm not quite sure how much time I put into the stone, but I know it was longer than the other massive pieces. At least it is a little bigger as well. I'm surprised it ended up being larger. I didn't think it would be starting the project. It is a neat stone, but mostly I think I am happy to just be done with it. Thanks for joining me on the journey of this piece. It was a long one for me, about 3.5 months from starting on the stone to posting this video. My next few video projects should go a lot quicker, so I'll see you soon.